Russia's energy crisis, and what is about to collapse. Putin's Russia is today facing the same predicament that collapsed the Soviet Union in the late 1990s, but the journey from glory to catastrophe was rather imperceptible. Before the collapse, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, was in the same glory as Russia today. People from the Soviet Union were excelling in every arena, leaving the Western world behind. It was the Soviet Union that had the title of sending the first man into space or building the first ever nuclear power plant. The USSR was ruling the world with 15 republics that were rich in natural resources. However, after the collapse, the entire picture changed. The remaining republic we call Russia is what shows the traces of the once victorious Soviet Union. But why are we talking about the Soviet Union today? Well, it appears that Russia is following the footsteps of the Soviet Union, which doomed it to collapse. But how? Well, the same ingredient that allowed the Soviet Union to dominate the globe was oil and gas. But today, these very two elements have become the ingredients that can collapse Russia. The unforgiving spiral of crisis has been brewing lately that is just due to Russia's oil and gas resources. But how can they be a source of catastrophe when earlier the Soviet Union got leverage from them? To know that, you must learn about the underlying factors hidden in everyday news. Before we continue further, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel for more videos on current world affairs and the changing world order. Let's continue now. You see, the Russian Republic inherited most of the system and resources from its parent republic, the Soviet Union. Out of this inherited wealth, oil and gas are of utmost importance. The very same fields that were producing oil and gas in Soviet days are being used by Russia even today. Russia successfully exploited the wealth left by the Soviet Union, meaning it expanded its oil and gas production and dominated the world's energy sector. That's why many analysts call Russia an oil company with a president who acts as a CEO. Putin himself has called Russia the global energy superpower, which suggests that he knows Russia dominates the energy sector, and this dominance demands that other countries recognize Russia as a superpower. As of 2021, Russia was producing 10.5 million barrels of oil per day, accounting for a staggering 14% of the global supply. Just reckon this, only one country could provide 14% of the world's oil supply. And that's not the end. Russia has the second largest gas reserves, standing after the United States. Yes, Russia seems to have everything, which can give it crunchy dollar, euro, and pound bills. Russia sells all its natural gas to Asia and Europe. Even Europe is its most profitable market because it fulfills 45% of the natural gas demands of the European Union. In return, Russia gets tens of billions of euros every year. That's where we realize that as Europe depends on Russia for natural gas, Russia needs Europe's money. Europe is a cash cow which Russia cannot afford to leave. This makes the same situation which hints toward the possibility of Russian collapse again, the same as the Soviet Union fall. Let's know in depth about it. Russia is simply too dependent on its oil and gas. No doubt, the dependence is entirely on its own resources. However, it can give Russia a major blow if somehow the energy market falls. Unlike Saudi Arabia, which diversified its income source and economy after exploiting its oil, Russia has chosen to stay classic. In other words, Russia didn't try to diversify its economy by leveraging oil and gas. Rather, it has grown its economy more around oil and gas, making it more dependent on them than ever. Surprisingly, when you see the revenue Russia makes from exports, 60% of this revenue comes from oil and gas exports. About 45% of Russia's budget comes from oil and gas. If we see Russia's GDP from 2017 to 2022, oil and gas sales make up 12 to 22% of its GDP. The situation becomes precarious for Russia when half of this oil and gas revenue comes from Europe. Well, this does not mean Russia does not want to accept money from Europe. Rather, it's the underlying reason Russia is not thinking about. What if Europe's market just vanishes away? Yes, we know that Europe heavily depends upon Russia, but the same is true if we flip the equation. Russia needs Europe. There is no denying this fact. This is the very reason which can catalyze Russia's collapse. Not only that, but Russia has to accept that it's a slave to oil and gas. Every time these two commodities prices fluctuate and go down, Russia will be crippled. If the oil and gas prices are halved, Russia's GDP will fall by roughly 10%, its export revenue by 30%, and its budget by 20%. That's how vulnerable and defenseless Russia is. Saudi Arabia and the United States are also nations depending upon oil and gas. However, they have other sectors that pull in revenue. If oil and gas fields in both these countries dry tomorrow, they will undoubtedly suffer but survive through the situation. But Russia won't make it. It simply cannot because it has nothing as reliable as oil and gas. Russia just didn't spare some time to think about innovation and diversification of income generation. Some argue that after Putin came into power in 2000, Russia's GDP skyrocketed for 9 consecutive years. However, this was not due to diversification, but rather an increase in prices that had nothing to do with Putin. Even the oil and gas fields Russia today has are the same that the Soviet Union left. Russia uses the same traditional technology to mine oil and extract gas that the Soviet Union days companies used. Literally, this means that Russia did nothing. Rather, it has been eating what was left by the parent republic. According to the latest studies, 2/3 of oil fields in Russia require the latest technology, which Russia lacks. In other words, Russia is just using 1/3 of its oil reserves without benefiting from the remaining 66%. Well, that's not a tragedy. However, Russia certainly can do something. Countries that do not have the means and technology usually welcome foreign companies and share the profits. Gradually, the technology and means are earned, and the country starts to exploit its own resources. However, Russia is following a closed-door policy where no company can come and ask for collaboration on oil mining. Russia simply cannot allow any foreign company to even go near the oil reserves because it does not trust them. Well, no matter the reason, Russia is getting itself into a quagmire that will continuously take it down. Back in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, which resulted in the U.S. sanctioning Russia, resulting in a decline in Russian revenue. Furthermore, Europe welcomed the Green Revolution, which can give another major blow to Russia in the long run. However, the ebbing revenues due to sanctions and the over-reliance on oil and gas are the problems knocking at Putin's door. Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, which he calls his military exercises, changing the landscape. But why did Putin make this risky move? Was it really due to NATO reaching Ukraine and threatening Russia? Well, it appears these were not the only reasons. Before the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was an important republic, coming after Moscow on the priority list. Ukraine, like the Soviet Union, had vast oil and gas reserves besides its exceptional crop production. And today, this is why gas pipelines pass through Ukraine and enter Europe. Naturally, Ukraine has a strategic location where it can exploit the pipelines that carry natural gas from Russia to Europe. Russia has been safeguarding its interest by bringing pro-Russia presidents, sometimes dethroned by pro-West ones. It no doubt pays a fee to Ukraine for getting the pipeline hub. But these fees increase whenever the pro-West president comes into power. The price that Ukraine pays for Russian gas had also become a problem in the past when Russia faced heavy losses. For example, in April 2005, Putin unfairly demanded 3 times more prices for gas from Ukraine. This was simply unacceptable demand in a realistic world. But when Putin didn't get high prices, the gas supply was cut for 3 days, resulting in a low gas supply to European countries. Again, in January 2009, Putin cut off the gas supply to European countries for over 12 days, leaving millions without heat. In 2014, the situation was similar when a pro-Russian Ukraine president was ousted. Putin decided to annex Crimea afterward, which was part of Ukraine in those days. A little-known fact is that Crimea had several offshore oil reserves, which it could sell to Europe and thus become an alternative for Europe. It could cause Russia to lose tens of billions of dollars, which Putin simply could not bear. Hence, he decided to annex Crimea. But this does not mean we are implying that Putin annexed Crimea for its gas. However, it's quite a rare coincidence that Russia annexed that region with a large gas reserve. Russia was using its gas leverage whenever it wanted, and the world could not just stand and see how exploitation was done. The European Union brought significant blows to Russia after the 2009 gas crisis by ensuring one rule. This rule forbade one company from a monopoly on energy infrastructure and price. In other words, this was targeted at Gazprom, the Russian state-owned multinational energy corporation. Simply, the EU had ripped Gazprom from pocketing high profits. Even now, policies about green energy and climate change further increase the pressure on Russia, causing declining revenue that makes Russia's GDP. Furthermore, the reduced oil and gas imports from Russia injured Russia's economy. This is where you should recall the earlier statement. Oil and gas make up 20% of Russian GDP, 45% of its budget, and 60% of exports. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has forced the EU to execute a full-fledged plan against Russia. Already, the EU members have started reducing the reliance on Russian natural gas, ultimately becoming independent. Not only is it a matter of oil and gas, but there are now few countries willing to buy any Russian products. Europe has tolerated Russia's blackmailing, but now the time is over. Europe's market no longer need Russia's products, which means no matter whether Russia survives or not, Europe won't feel any difference. The price cap on Russian oil has literally ruled out the possibility of Putin increasing oil prices to cover the gaps. The $86 per barrel price is what Russia will get from the international market. Either it can accept it or decide to waste millions of barrels of oil it is producing every day. Remember how the Soviet Union collapsed? Well, this is how exactly it was done. If Russia collapses, remember this was due to oil and gas. Yes, only oil and gas. Do you think Russia can get rid of this perpetual crisis it is in today? Comment your opinions in the comment section right below. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to get a notification every time we upload a new video. This is the channel where you can get all the compiled information about ever-changing world affairs and subjects. Thanks for watching, and until the next episode, stay tuned.